Hey guys, I wanted to come on and show you how I go about trying to make a transfer all on one sheet from a template that has multiple layers in it. And so this is the first time I'm trying to video myself doing this, so we'll see how this comes out. But we're in it together. So basically, I have my sunflower Love Yourself rhinestone template, okay? And I have the 4 different layers uh, right here. So here are all of my 4 layers. And as you can see, each of them has a star in the corner that I cut out, okay? And I will admit that I probably cut this star just a little bit too big, but it's my first time creating the template this way. So I'll make them smaller for future layered templates that I make. But the purpose of the registration mark, the star serves as your registration point. And what you would do is you would line up your star after for each layer, so that those stones would then line up the way they did before the template was reduced down to its layers. So hopefully, as I go through it, it'll make a little bit more sense. But for now, I'm going to move my other 3 parts out of the way. And I'm going to start with my first layer. Now, some people have a different setup. I work from my dining room table here. As you can see, it's a mess. But this is my workstation. And what I'm going to do is right now I have the first layer mounted on the backing of the rhinestone flock material. Okay. And I do that because what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of transfer tape that is slightly larger than this actual template so that I can create a hinge on one side of the transfer tape. So let me grab my transfer tape. Here it is. And again, I'm going to cut out a piece that is larger than necessary. But again, I want to create that a hinge on the other end of it. So here we go. I'm going to cut that. Okay. So I'm going to cut that. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to peel it off. Peel off the backing. And you could do this, if you have a large tray that you typically stone your templates on, you could do it that way as well if your tray is large enough. I don't have a tray, so I use what I have. And so again, I'm going to use my dining room table, and I'm just going to lay down this piece of transfer paper, and I'm going to leave, like I said, extra piece over here on the end so that I can just fold it over. Okay, so I can just fold it over and fold it out of the way. So we have our first piece down. Okay, and I'm just going to fold it over. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed to stone this part of my design. So I'm going to start with the sunflower leaves, the big ones, and I'm going to stone those in yellow. And if you've never stoned a template before, you always want to pour out more stones than what you need. That's what's going to help the stones to brush in easier, flip over like they're supposed to when your hole size is cut to the size that fits the stone that you're working with. I'm currently using SS10 Hotfix rhinestones. Okay, and I'm just going to again carefully brush these in. I tend to use the smaller brush. I just feel like it gives me a little bit more control, especially when I'm working in areas where I don't necessarily want to tape like this L out of the way. So I work with a smaller brush so that I can get in the smaller areas. And I'll just continue to brush and move those stones out of the way. And I tend to press down and in a circular motion as I move away from where I am brushing. And that tends to help me brush those stones in without too much difficulty. So now I'm just going to brush my excess stones off to the side, take them off the template, and then I'm going to scoop them back into the jar out of the way, because I don't want, when I bring my transfer paper over, to pick up any loose stones. So just going to go over this, check it, make sure I don't have any overlapping stones. Okay, and I'm going to stone my L in a different stone color, which is why I don't currently have it brushed in right the moment. But now I'm just gonna, this is what I do. I just take my funnel and my jar of stones, and I just bring them and I just scoop them back into the container. Not the best way, I'm certain, but it works for me. You do what works for you. So I'm going to just carefully lift this so that I can get those stones that slipped up underneath there out of the way. And continue to put that back in there. Okay, so there are those. And let's see, I'm going to use this Capri Blue AB for this part of the design. And again, just kind of carefully brush those in there. All right, so now I'm gonna brush those back into the container. Get rid of that little overlapping stone. Okay, so now that I have that first layer of the template brushed in, I'm gonna take my transfer tape, okay, like I said, which is already kind of hinged over here. I've got it taped down on this edge of the table, and I'm just going to bring it over, and I'm going to bring it down, okay? So I'm going to bring it down, and then I'm going to use my brush, or you can use your hand, or whatever, to press those rhinestones into the transfer paper, okay? Once you've done that, you're going to lift your transfer tape and you're going to carefully peel it back, making sure that all of your rhinestones are affixed to the transfer tape. Okay? So now all of my rhinestones are affixed to the transfer tape. I want to, if you have any stones that shift or move or flip over in the process, just bring it back down and do it again. Okay? So I also make sure to check the back side of my transfer tape to look at my stones to make sure and see if there are any that don't have any adhesive backing on the back, because sometimes that does happen. And this one does. So let me see if I can find a pair of tweezers right quick. And this table is a hot mess, but I think I found a pair. I see one of my stones over here needs to be replaced, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull it off. And I'm going to replace it with a new one. You could either bring your transfer tape back over and then put that stone in the hole where it belongs, which is what I'm going to currently do, just to make sure that it lines up with the other stones in the template. Okay, just bring that back over, press it down, lift it up. Okay, we got a stray stone over here. Let's move it out of the way. Okay, so now now that I have the transfer tape hinged, I've got it laid over to the side. I'm going to remove, well, I'm not going to remove, excuse me, what I like to do is I take the backing that came off of the very first piece of transfer tape that I laid down, okay, and then I'm going to take my second layer of the transfer, which is the piece with the outer leaves and part of the wording, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to peel it off. Okay, I'm going to peel it off of this backing, and I'm going to place it onto this piece of the back side of the transfer paper. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line up, if you can see, okay, I'm going to line up this star, this registration star, with the registration star of the template underneath. And I'm just going to make sure that it sits right on top of the other one. Okay, it's lined up. I can see the opening through the back of the mesh of this paper. Once I do that, I'm going to bring my transfer paper back over, and I'm just going to verify the placement. So I don't know if you can see, but I pulled it back over, and you can see where the second layer of the template lines up with the first part of the template that I've already done. Okay. So with that, I'm going to pull this transfer tape back over out of the way. And just, if it's not quite lined up properly, you can shift it, you can move it till you get it where it needs to be. I'm going to make a little bit of adjustment here using my registration star as my guide. But once I feel like I have that in the right position, I'm going to pull that transfer tape over to the side, and then I'm going to carefully, very carefully, layer in my next set of stones. If you don't feel confident that you won't shift the second layer, you can always tape it down so that it doesn't move. So I'm going to do that right now just so that I can show you. But again, you can tape it down so that it doesn't move. And then you can go ahead and proceed to brush in your second layer of stones. I'm going to be using this hunter green for the outer part of the leaves. And I'm going to use a different color for the letters. So I'm just going to be very careful about how I brush in my stones so that I don't get stones in the letters since I did not take them off. But again, if you're not comfortable with doing it this way, you can always use some blue painter's tape and tape over the areas of the design that you don't want your stones to fall into those holes until you're ready to brush in that area, that section of the template. I'm just going to go ahead and try to be very careful. And for the areas that don't quite brush in, I will just take my tweezers and I will just manually place those stones in those missing holes. Sometimes, it's faster than trying to brush them in. I accidentally cause those stones to move and pop out of the hole. So I'm just going to brush them back in, all while cleaning up this last bottom part and moving those stones out of the way. Okay, brush those in. And we'll just take our tweezers and I'm just going to fill in the ones that didn't brush in. Something wrong with this. You could also do this with a wax pencil, with the wax tip. I just tend to use my tweezers. Because that's what works for me. Okay, so now I'm going to go over it again and just make sure I don't have any overlapping stones in there, and I got a few. So we're just going to make sure that we don't brush those out. And next up, I'm going to figure out, so now my L, I got to think about this for a second. I want to make sure that I don't get my letters wrong. So I think these are the alternating color. So I'm going to do, oops, I accidentally picked up some stones. I shouldn't have did that. But I'm going to be using this aquamarine AB color because I love blue. Blue is one of my favorite colors. So go ahead and brush these in real quick. Okay, we got that brushed in. Go ahead and move those stones out of the way. Okay, so now that I have that part of the template brushed in, we're going to take our transfer sheet, we're going to pull it back over, and we're going to lay it down very gently. And then we're going to, again, press those stones. Okay, so there's my second layer, if you can see it. There's the second layer of our template brushed in and affixed to the transfer tape. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that those stones are affixed to the transfer tape. Again, we're going to peel back that transfer tape, check the back side, make sure that all of our stones have glue on the back side of them, and then just lay it out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to pull up this layer and I'll put these little pieces of tape to the side because we'll use them again. Move that out of the way, and I will put this piece of the transfer back on its backing sheet. We're going to use that again. Okay, so now I'm going to get the third part of the template, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to peel it off of the backing, and I'm going to use that back side of that transfer paper, and I'm going to lay it down. Smooth it out, and again I'm going to line up my square with my square here. Okay, so we're going to line that up, and then we're going to pull our transfer sheet over, and we're just going to verify that everything lines up nice and neat. Okay, once I make sure that everything is lined up the way it should be, I'm going to pull back my transfer tape. Lay that off to the side. And again, if you don't feel comfortable, go ahead and tape down that layer to your workstation so that it doesn't move. Okay. So next up, I'm going to be using now I know I brought it to the table. Okay, oh, here they are. Okay, so I'm gonna go, I've got my brown coffee, or my brown coffee colored stones, and I'm gonna put those right here in the middle. Okay. I'm gonna brush those in. Make quick work of that. Being careful not to brush them into the areas of the letters that I don't want with this color rhinestone. And brush those out of the way. Okay, so I'm done with the brown. And for this template, we got to make sure which of the letters, which color we're supposed to be using. And I think these are the Capri Blue AB stones. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and brush those in. good placement. Excuse me. Your holes for SS10 will brush in at a hole spacing size of 0.130, sometimes a little smaller. Just depends on the version of the brand of stone that you might be using. Some vendors stones have a smaller diameter, but the stones that I carry, they will typically brush in if your hole spacing size is 0.130, or if you feel more comfortable and you want just a little bit more wiggle room, you can size that within a range up to 0.135. So anywhere from 0.130 to 0.135, and your stone should brush in without any difficulty. Anything smaller than that, you might have a hard time brushing in your stones, and if they're too small, then your stones won't brush in at all. Okay, that's usually where some people make their errors. Their hole sizes, their stone hole size is not the right size, and so that's one of the reasons they have a hard time getting their stones to flip over like they're supposed to. I got these are brushed in. We're just getting rid of any of the overlaps out of the way. Okay. Make sure I grab the right bottle. I'm notorious for grabbing the wrong bottle and putting the stones in the wrong container. So make sure you're always paying attention as to which container of stones you're working with. Ideally, don't have more at your workstation than what you're currently working with. And that will typically tend not to happen. But if you're like me and you're always multitasking and have more things out, just be careful, pay attention. Okay. So now that I have those stones all brushed in, I'm going to again come back over, bring my transfer tape over, and I'm going to carefully lay that down. If it looks like it's not right, you can be careful not to let. Oh, we didn't. And I can see that that is slightly off, but it may not be me per se. It could have been in the cut of the template, but in any event, it's not that noticeable, and it's for me, so it should be fine. Okay, like I said, rub it down. When you're done, we're going to lift it up. We've got one last layer to do. Double check. Make sure your stones have glue on the back. And let's go on to the very last layer of this template. Before I do that, I see a few stones that look like they could be replaced. Looks like it was about one. So I'm just going to grab me a little brown rhinestone here and fill that in. Oops. Pull my transfer tape back over so I can see where that was. Where did I move that? Okay, right there. Okay, and press it down. Okay, right, we're down to the last layer. I'm going to pull up this tape. Put this one back on its backing. And the reason I still have the backing from my flock is because I typically tend to pull the flock off of the backing and place it directly on the mat before I cut it. For me, with this particular flock, it just tends to cut better that way. I have far few stones that need weeding when I do it this way. So here we go. I'm gonna lay that out. Line that up. Check my placement by bringing my transfer paper over and making sure that everything lines up. Do it this way, you have a much better opportunity to make sure that you can get things lined up the way you need them to be. Okay, I like that. So I'm happy with this placement. I'm going to go ahead and tape it down so that it doesn't move. Okay, and then I'm going to be using my icicle AB for the word your, and I'm going to go back with the aquamarine AB for the O and the F, but I'm going to go ahead and brush this in first. Now I know a lot of people say they don't like these transparent color stones because it's very hard to see what's top and what's bottom because the adhesive on the back is clear. These are great because they're an AB stone, so they have the iridescent effect when they're in the light, which allows you to be able to see whether or not the stone is turned right side up or upside down. So that's why I chose this particular one rather than just the plain transparent. But also because I wanted to keep in line with the AB theme on this part of the design. So anyway, don't shy away from using the transparent stones. They do take a minute to get used to, but they really do help, especially if you're doing designs with sublimation and you want to rhinestone over the top of your sublimated design for color. The transparent stones do a great job of doing that, and they're very forgiving. Okay, I got one little stone that, oh, no, I got two stones that need to be filled in. So I'm going to put a stone there. And a stone there. Brush away any excess. Oh. I accidentally brushed 2 out of the way. And okay. And go ahead and brush these back into the container. Now, there are other ways to do this. There may be. This is just the way that I do it. And like I said, this method with the hinge works best for me. Okay. And last but not least, I have my aquamarine AB. Let's go ahead and quickly get those brushed in. So this method works whether you're doing a 2-layer or an 8-layer template. It will still work the same. If you don't have a template that has registration marks, like the one that I'm using today, you can still achieve lining up your design by, again, just laying out your first layer and then positioning, positioning your subsequent layers accordingly before you, you put the layer down, bring your transfer tape over, line everything up, and then pull your transfer tape out of the way so that you can then brush in those rhinestones. So you can still do it without the registration mark. It might take you a little bit longer to get the placement, but you can still do it. So now that I've got those brushed in, again, this is the last layer. We're going to bring it over. And there we go. Look at there. There we go. We now have a finished rhinestone transfer that we can now take to our garment and press, or if you were selling transfers, you could then just put the backing back on the back of the transfer tape and ship that properly packaged to your customer. So hopefully you got a good understanding of how you create a rhinestone transfer from a multi-layered template. Thanks, and I'll be back with another tutorial soon. Bye.